now.
The cliff top was bleak, deserted, and windswept, although it was a sunny day. The Carmaddock research establishment rested in a small valley. It was well protected by high walls and barbed wire, and surrounded by clumps of undergrowth. From this undergrowth, there stumbled a tall, spare, bespectacled young man. He appeared to be almost exhausted. He stumbled and stopped. He took his spectacles off to wipe them. The sunlight flashed onto them. The flare of light reflected into his eyes, and a voice said,
Guthrie! Guthrie! Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Guthrie?
Guthrie wheeled round. There was no one there. No one at all. Episode 1 of this story, in which John Steed is taken off the case and Emma Peel is put onto one that could be all done by mirrors. Guthrie, the young man on the cliff top, stood gazing about him in sheer terror. The wind whipped at his clothing, tore into his mind. Beneath his feet, the earth seemed to tremble. Out at sea, the waves crashed in white fury against the base of the lighthouse. Guthrie dragged his wits together and started to run towards the buildings of the Carmaddock research establishment. But once more, he stumbled. His spectacles fell to the ground. He stooped to retrieve them. The sunlight flashed on them, blinding him, and a voice said,
Guthrie! Stop, Guthrie! Get on your feet! You hear me? Get on your feet. Don't turn around. You hear me?
Yes.
Get your hands high. Higher. Come on, way above your head.
I can't.
Come along now. Keep facing front. I'm right behind you, Guthrie. Back up to me. Come on now. Nice and slow. That's it. That's it. More. Nice and slow. Come on. That's it. Back up.
Guthrie lost his footing. He couldn't see behind him what was below. He fell from the cliff with a hideous cry to his death on the rocks below. He left behind him echoing laughter. At that moment, quite some miles away, John Steed was enjoying the sunshine near a swimming pool. In the pool, floating on a large, inflated rubber armchair, was Mother. He was in a bathing costume, smoking one of his expensive cigars, sipping a gin and tonic, with his red telephone on a small cushion floating alongside. Mother was relaxing.
Mother. Oh, yes. Hard at it as usual. Can't afford to sit back and relax, you know. Oh, no. No, I don't think so. Steed? No, it's impossible. At the moment, he's under close arrest.
I must say, Mother, I think putting me under close arrest is a bit thick.
I couldn't agree more, Steed. But you must appreciate my position.
Your position looks reasonably relaxed to me.
Quite. But I have responsibilities. The secrets have been leaking from the Carmaddock research establishment, and you have spent a great deal of time there recently.
But that was at your request.
You and I know that, but the people at the establishment don't. So what's more natural than they should vent their spleen and suspicion on the only stranger in their midst? Me. You.
I thought he was rather rough.
Yes, maybe. But I've had to act with, all haste and due caution. They like phrases like that.
What have you told them?
Not much. Just that you are being held pending a full inquiry.
Which won't take place.
Of course not. But think of all the memos, all the paperwork that saves. Meanwhile, well, you must admit that I've tried to make the circumstances of your arrest as congenial as possible.
Would you like a drink, Mr. Steed? Gin and tonic?
Oh, well, I suppose if you insist, thank you.
There's everything you need here. Look upon it as a sort of necessary holiday.
I might just be forced into that. Do you know, Mother, this isn't going to solve the problems at Carmelic.
No, I agree. But I'm putting someone else onto it.
Who? May I ask who?
Very pretty. Lovely dive. Morning, Mrs. Peel.
Oh, good morning, Mother. Hello there, Steed.
Morning. You're more than usually energetic this morning.
I feel great. Ready for anything.
Good. Glad you like the water. You're going to the seaside. Breath of air at Carmelic.
Ah, I thought so.
It suits me. When do we start?
Steed will not be accompanying you. He's under arrest.
What? Arrested?
I'm innocent, I tell you, I'm innocent.
With all these girls about, you won't be for long.
You'll find all the details you need in here.
Mother picked up a file from the floating table and threw it onto the side of the pool. Mrs. Peel heaved herself out of the water.
So I'm to handle this alone, am I?
I didn't say that. I'll arrange for some support. Now, where is that young man? Oh, there he is. Watney? Watney?
You wanted these, yeah? What we want is what name? I've come here before, haven't I?
Watney will be going with you, Mrs. Peel. It'll make a change for both of you. Won't it, Steed?
And that's how it started. Steed watched Mrs. Peel and Watney leave the pool and eventually climb into Emma's car. He thought they made a strange partnership and wondered why Mother had arranged it. Somehow he couldn't see it working on a very sophisticated level. Mrs. Peel was of a very similar opinion.
Have you worked with Mr. Steed for very long, Mrs. Peel?
Sometimes it feels like a lifetime. We've had a lot of fun.
I see. I didn't think having fun was the object of these exercises.
It isn't, but it helps.
I see. How much do you know about the Carmelic Research Establishment?
Nothing at all.
Don't you think you should run a little homework?
I'll let it come as a delightful surprise.
I should have thought it would have been more to your credit if you were completely au fait with the complexities of the assignment.
I've read the file, if that makes you feel any better.
Steed should have cleared it up all before this.
Perhaps there wasn't very much to clear up.
Well, must there? Mother must have had reasons for taking Steed off the case and putting me onto it.
Yes. I admit that doesn't make much sense.
Secrets have been leaking out. It's either an inside or an outside job.
Really?
Yes. We've intercepted coded radio messages for the past few weeks, giving
up-to-the-minute reports on every detail of the work carried out at the Carmelic Research Establishment. Yes, I know. As I've already said, I have read the file.
Well, I think you'd better stick close to me, Mrs. Peel. And then, if there's any trouble...
I'll be able to get you out of it. All right, Watney. I'll look after you, don't worry.
On that not very cooperative note, the conversation ended. At the Carmelic Research Station, Watney was very impressed by the security precautions. Having parked the car, they were both very carefully screened. Eventually, they were shown into an inner laboratory. Behind a large desk sat Major Sparshot, a tough, taciturn, humorless man. He also inspected their papers.
Peel, Emma. Seems in order.
Oh, I am.
Watney. Extraordinary name.
My parents happen to be rather fond of it.
Extraordinary. Well, I'm Sparshot, Major Sparshot. I'm in charge of security here. I suppose the two of you want to look around, tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Well, for a start,
yes?
you could remember that we are on your side.
Yes, I suggest you follow me. As you can see, security is an extremely efficient peak, anti-bugging devices, hidden recorders, long-range mics. Nothing can stand up to this sort of stuff. You know what we're doing here, I suppose?
Solar power? Trying to harness the power of the sun?
That is a simple way of putting it. But you'll see it isn't all that simple. By the way, your visit here...
It's top secret. Nobody knows about it.
Sparshot gave the young man a withering glance and led them into a further room, in the center of which was a large revolving mirror. The room was surrounded by armed guards. Sparshot indicated them.
There they are, you see. You can tell we don't take chances.
Major Sparshot, there are only two alternatives. It's an inside or an outside.
I personally screen everyone working in this establishment.
Then let's leave that for the moment. What about outside?
Yes. Official procedure demands that we ask, have there been any unusual occurrences?
No, it's ridiculous. There can't be any possible connection.
Try us.
Well, the other day, a local resident fell over the cliff head.
What was his name?
Guthrie. Walter Guthrie.
Does he live near here?
There's a cottage about a mile away, Appleby Cottage in Farnham Lane, in lodgings there.
I think I'll do a bit of checking up right now.
But I said, look here, Mrs.
Oh,
Peel.
don't worry, Watney. I won't get lost.
But what about me?
Much better if you stay here. After all, you are completely au fait with the complexities of the assignment. I'll see you.
Sparshot permitted himself a faint smile.
Perhaps you would like to check on the rest of security, Mr. Watney. This way. I should be most interested to have your opinion.
Sparshot conducted Watney over the building, confident that the young man would find no faults in his security system. He would have been utterly shattered had he overheard a telephone conversation that was going on as Mrs. Peel drove her way along the cliff road.
Hello? Sir? It's Markin here, sir. It's the girl, sir, Mrs. Emma Peel. She's left the Carmodic Research Center. She's on her way to Guthrie's cottage right now. You think we should take action? Look in on what she's doing? All right, leave it to you. Should be very interesting.
Now?
Well, Mr. Watney, you've seen over the whole of the building. I think you'll agree that the security precautions are more than successful. In fact, the whole of this center is so well guarded that it's foolproof.
I must say I can see no fault at all, Major Sparshot. Who designed the security system?
You're John Steed, actually.
I see. Oh, no wonder Mrs. Peel was so sure of herself.
I told you so.
But we know information is leaking out of here. And it's my job to find out how. If only I had something to go on.
Who knows? Perhaps Mrs. Peel may come up with something.
Mrs. Peel, at that moment, was driving her car along the cliff road towards Appletree Cottage in Farnham Lane. She wouldn't have been surprised if she'd known Sparshot and Watney were talking about her, but she would have been very surprised if she could have heard another conversation on a telephone.
Yes, sir. Markin here. The girl, Mrs. Emma Peel. She's left the Carmodic Research Place and is heading for Guthrie's cottage. Think we should take action? Look in on what she's doing? Right. I'll leave everything to you. Should be very interesting.
Episode 2 of this story, in which John Steed has his doubts about Mrs. Peel's assignment, and Mrs. Peel herself finds evidence to suggest that the security leak is all done by mirrors. John Steed had been placed under close arrest. It was Mother's idea, and Steed knew there was far more to it than he'd been told. The close arrest meant, in fact, that Steed was on holiday, pending the clearing up of the security problems at the Carmodic Research Establishment. Steed knew better than to question Mother too closely. He waited his time, sitting in the sunshine under a large, colourful umbrella, playing chess.
Oh, used to be able to play this blindfold. Better take the bandages off, Mother, or you'll be checkmate in 2 moves.
You think I can't read your mind, Steed?
There. Oh, very good. It's stalemate, Mother. Want another? Not just at the moment. Speaking of stalemate, how long is this going on? You mean the chess, the fine weather, or just life in general? I mean this enforced retirement from the game of catching mastermind. Until the problems at Carmodic are cleared up. Think it can be done without me? It's got to be. One hesitates to be disloyal to a colleague, but really using Watney is a little like advancing a pawn, isn't it? Pawns can be very useful. And after all, we have the queen in the game. Well, that's what worries me. Mrs. Peel is more than capable on her own. Mother, I know we all have to start somewhere, but really, Watney... Wait for the report, Steed. I'll see that you're informed. If she gets into serious trouble, Mother, I warn you.
You'll find I'll break out of this pleasant prison.
If she gets into serious trouble, you won't have to. Now set up the pieces again. I'm in a winning mood.
All right. There's a puzzle. Inside, outside, or something in between.
What sort of opening gambit is that?
I'm thinking of the Carmatic Research Center. I worked out that security system myself. I'll swear it's foolproof. It must be inside.
And I personally screened everyone from Major Sparshot down. It's got to be outside.
Or something in between. A method of getting inside from the outside without anyone knowing it. It's a tough one.
Yeah, so is beating me at chess. Your move, Steed.
Mrs. Peel, the object of everyone's thoughts, managed to find Apple Tree Cottage without any trouble at all. She parked her car under some trees and walked swiftly up the path. The front door was ajar. Mrs. Peel knocked. There was no answer. So she entered. To her amazement, she found herself not in an old-fashioned room filled with chintz and easy chairs with antimacassars, but what looked like the study of an amateur astronomer. There were books on the subject in every room, astral charts, and, pointing from the far window, quite a large telescope. It was all very learned, all very pleasant. The only strange thing was that all the mirrors in the room had been broken. Splinters of glass scattered the floor. The door slammed behind her. Mrs. Peel wheeled round to find herself confronted by a sweet old lady.
He isn't home yet. I've made the tea. Twice. And he still isn't home yet. It's really very puzzling. Not himself at all. Oh, I'm Miss Daisy.
Who isn't home, Miss Daisy?
Mr. Guthrie.
But Mr. Guthrie is...
Not home yet. Yes, that's what I was saying. And he's always so very punctual. Very punctual. I should know. After all, I've looked after him for 10 years now.
Oh, then you knew him. Know him very well.
Like my own son. Such a nice gentleman. Oh, I do wish he'd come home for tea.
He must be a very interesting man. An astronomer?
Yes. That's the stars, you know. Up there. The stars. Would you like to have some tea? Well, then by the time it's brewed, he should be home.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I'd like a cup.
Emma Peel hadn't the faintest idea that her conversation was being listened to by the man named Markin.
I'm sorry, sir. I can only pick them up very faintly. You are sure you're spot on, sir? You better try another angle. Still not very good. Hold it, that's better.
Really so unlike him. Can you tell me a little more about him? Who? Oh, Mr. Guthrie. Yes, of course.
Okay, I've got them now, loud and clear. Hear every word.
In the cottage, Miss Daisy poured tea and wandered on.
Yes, he won't be long. This is his room, you know.
I thought it might be. They say it's 7 years bad luck.
Eh? What's that?
Breaking the mirror.
Oh, that wasn't me. That was Mr. Guthrie. I helped him, of course. Take a hammer, Daisy, he said. Take a hammer and smash everything shiny. Oh, it was wicked of me. But you know, I quite enjoyed it.
He did it deliberately. But didn't he say why?
Why what, my dear?
Why he wanted to smash things.
Oh, not things. Only the shiny things. I think it had something to do with Mr. Williams.
Who's Mr. Williams?
Oh, he's such a nice man, Mr. Williams. And he and Mr. Guthrie get along so well together.
Where does he live?
Oh, in the sweetest little house.
I mean, exactly where does he live?
Down the road. One takes the first turning on the left by the sycamores, down as far as the laburnum, and straight on until you come to the rhododendrons. And the very next house is the one owned by Mr. Williams. Oh, excuse me, my dear. Do you mind if I draw the curtains? The sunlight is really quite dazzling.
Miss Daisy crossed to the window and drew the curtains. Markin's receiving set went dead. He got on the telephone immediately.
I'm sorry, sir. It went as dead as a doornail. Yes, just as the old lady was talking about Frederick Williams. Yes, it's time to move. Well, we have a head start. Yes, I agree. Yes, sir, Gotho is here with me. He will take care of everything. Thank you, sir. Goodbye. Gotho.
A moronic, monumental Mongolian moved forward.
Sir.
You heard that? Frederick Williams. You know what to do?
Sir, take the head then.
Gozzo stopped and picked up a large piece of firewood. Enough said. Some little time after that, Frederick Williams was trying to work out a fairly difficult equation on the back of an envelope. He was so engrossed in his work that he failed to hear the door of his workshop creak open. Gozzo, surprisingly light on his feet for a man of his size, slid into the room. His large hands were outstretched. Williams, sensing that something was wrong, swung round and leapt to his feet. Too late.
No!
And at the Carnatic Research Center...
So you see, Watney, the solar rays are picked up, refracted into the ultraviolet and infrared, fed into the regurgitator here, fed through the Advent Climax condensers, exaggerated in the accelerator correct system, fed out in pure plus X deradiated energy, put into activated assistance here. That's in layman's terms, of course.
Quite. Most scientific. Thank you.
More simply, the sun makes the wheels go round.
I see. Major Sparshot.
Yes, Mr. Watney.
The fellow with the binoculars, over there at the window.
Dr. Seligman. Brilliant.
He appears to be behaving in a very suspicious manner.
Allow me to introduce you. You can tell him so yourself.
No, really. I didn't mean...
Dr. Seligman, Mr. Watney thinks you're behaving suspiciously.
I understood that Mr. Watney was from the ministry on an educational tour.
Well, go ahead, Mr. Watney. Tell him.
I'm here to investigate the leakage of secrets.
To investigate the leakages? Or investigate us, Mr. Watney?
Both, if necessary. Now, gentlemen, I must insist that you all pay attention to me.
The scientists in the room all looked at young Watney for a hard moment, and all went back to work. Mother's going to get that report any minute, and it'll be a rocket for young Watney. Can't blame Mrs. Peel for this one. Mrs. Peel had reached the cottage that lay beyond the laburnums and the sycamores and the rhododendrons, and again had found the door open. She walked in. Frederick Williams was lying beside his upturned workbench, clearly strangled. Mrs. Peel knelt beside him.
Nasty. Strangled. And what's this in his hand?
Mrs. Peel extracted the crumpled envelope that Williams had been scribbling on when he was so viciously attacked. She was standing, trying to make sense of the figures scribbled upon it, lost in thought, when the door swung open a little wider. As Gozzo entered silently, a smile slobbering on his fleshy lips, his enormous hands outstretched.
Now?
Well, Mr. Watney, you say you're here to investigate the security leakages. Mr. Seligman has asked you if you are here to investigate us.
It's just that staring out to sea with binoculars seems rather unnecessary.
I happen to be a meteorologist. I should keep a frequent eye on the approaching weather.
But surely a place like this must get all the weather reports computerized and in the greatest detail. Binoculars, I mean...
It is amazing, young man, what one does not see under one's nose.
Mr. Watney, before I make an official report on your visit to your superiors, would you mind telling me which one of us you suspect? Do you think the leakage is an inside job? Which one of us is the guilty party? Have you decided yet?
Episode 3 in this story, in which John Steed is still out of action, and Emma Peel, with the help of Watney, learns that murder can be all done by mirror. The leakage of information at the Carnatic Research Establishment had been causing Mother grave concern. John Steed, who had set up the security system there, had been placed under close arrest in order to give Mrs. Peel a chance to handle the job. Mrs. Peel had been given the assistance of Watney, a young, up-and-coming agent. Steed, privately, thought that Watney would be more of a hindrance than a help. And so far, let's face it, Steed had been right. Certainly his interrogation of the senior scientist at Carmadoc had merely put their backs up. He'd done nothing to assist Mrs. Peel, who had traced an amateur radio astronomer, Frederick Williams. She'd found his cottage open, entered, and found him dead on the floor. He'd been strangled. Mrs. Peel found a crumpled envelope near the body. She was studying it when the door creaked open very slowly. The large Mongolian Gozzo entered silently and swiftly. Mrs. Peel wheeled round. Gozzo came for her, hands outstretched.
Frontal brutality!
Mrs. Peel kicked out, aiming in just the right place. It was an uneven fight, for Mrs. Peel was about a quarter of the man's size. Together, they made a rare mess of William's cottage. Mrs. Peel was getting the worst of it. The Mongolian's strength was superhuman. She fought him off with a series of brilliant throws and karate chops. Gozzo survived them all. Mrs. Peel appeared to faint. Gozzo rushed forward. Mrs. Peel recovered and sidestepped. Gozzo crashed out through the French window. Mrs. Peel followed up, tearing after him into the blazing sunlight. They grappled again. This time, Mrs. Peel had the advantage. She did a dazzling drop kick, which hurtled Gozzo backwards against a wheelbarrow filled with gardening tools. It was perhaps fortunate for her, and certainly unfortunate for Gozzo, that the scythe had its blade upturned. Mrs. Peel mopped her forehead.
So long, Goliath.
Well, young man, you've heard what Major Starshot said. Which of us do you think is guilty?
Well, I'm not making any accusations, Dr. Seligman. I'm only trying to do my job.
There has to be someone in this laboratory, doesn't it? There's Tiedemann over there, Sparshot, Carswell, and me. The secrets that are supposed to have leaked out must have come from this room. Therefore, it's someone in this room who's guilty.
We haven't this specific knowledge, but the Major here sits in on every conference. It must be one of us.
All I can say is that the security here is as tight as a drum. No one can bug the place. Well, I'm inclined to think that there is no possibility of any outside influence. What? Oh, Mrs. Peel, goodness gracious. What on earth happened to you?
A very large man attacked me.
What? Did he get away? Which way did he go?
Mrs. Peel gave a thumbs down sign.
He went that way. He's dead.
What? You mean you?
It was accidental, but quite necessary.
When did this happen, Mrs. Peel?
In a house owned by Mr. Williams. He's dead, too.
I'll get some men to check the place.
Please. There might be something I've forgotten. Oh, Dr. Seligman, does this mean anything to you?
Mrs. Peel withdrew from her pocket the crumpled envelope she'd picked up from beside Frederick Williams' body. Seligman looked at the figures on the back.
It is a fairly simple equation. You want me to work it out?
Could you?
A computer can do it in seconds. It looks like some calculation on the refraction of light beams. Yes, that's what it is. There you are. Not that the answer means anything unless you know the question. That is science for you.
Yes, indeed it is.
Mrs. Peel, I'm most upset. I mean, all this trouble and I wasn't there.
Well, you should consider yourself lucky, Watney. Excuse me.
Mrs. Peel moved off to clean herself up a bit. Dr. Seligman sidled over to Watney.
Mr. Watney, I'd like to talk to you.
Oh, why, certainly. What do you wish to
No, not here. Not in front of the others. I don't trust anyone here anymore. There are some woods beyond the establishment. I'll leave now. Follow and meet me there in 10 minutes. I think it's very important. I think I know how the security leaks have come about. 10 minutes. Agreed?
And so, 10 minutes or so later, Watney made an excuse to leave the Carmadoc Research Center. Dr. Seligman was already past the guards and into the woods. In a clearing, he stopped and looked about him at the sunlight filtering through the branches and the leaves. He paused to light a pipe, a thoughtful frown on his face. Watney with usual bad judgment, had chosen to enter the wood by the other pathway. But Major Sparshot had not been so deceived. He was also in the wood. Dr. Seligman puffed at his pipe and waited. And then...
Dr. Seligman.
What the?
Over here. I must see you.
Who's calling me? Where are you?
Over here, Dr. Seligman. This way. This way, Dr. Seligman. Over here.
Seligman followed the direction of the voice. Then he noticed a bright light glinting on a tree trunk. He walked towards it. It was a piece of ordinary mirror. Seligman stopped and gazed at his own reflection. Then there was a flare of light into the mirror. Seligman, partially blinded, stepped backwards.
I was right. My theory was right.
That's right, Dr. Seligman. And so...
Watney heard the shot. It told him he was not on the right track. He broke into a run along the path, brushing aside branches, crashing through the undergrowth. He found Dr. Seligman lying by some bushes. Hurriedly, he knelt and cradled the dying man in his arms.
Watney, I know how they...
Don't talk. Take it easy.
It's no good. No good, Watney. I know how they do it. Mirrors. All done with mirrors.
Watney looked up from Seligman's dead body to the shattered mirror which still hung on the tree trunk. He moved to examine a portion of the glass still stuck to the frame. Watney was about to reach out and touch it when a flare of light caught the segment. Watney blinked and then heard it. What the devil?
Stay where you are. Don't move.
Major Sparshot emerged from the bushes, gun at the ready. Watney moved forward, taking the Major by surprise. He reached out and jerked the Major's gun from his hand. He sniffed it and broke it open.
Seems all right.
We surely don't think that
I have been trained to question everything, Major Sparshot.
So have I. I'd be very interested to know just what you and Dr. Seligman were doing leaving the building, to snoop around in these woods.
It was the doctor's idea. He approached me back there in the laboratory. He said he wanted to speak to me alone, that he didn't trust anyone in the building.
What?
It's true. He felt we could talk more freely out here. I followed him down here. I was on the other side of the clearing when I heard the shot. I came across. He died as I stooped over him.
Did he say anything before he died?
No, he didn't say anything.
Very strange.
I heard someone calling to him from another part of the wood. A voice echoing through the trees, calling his name. Did you hear anything?
No, I didn't.
Then there was laughter. A man's laughter.
There couldn't have been anyone hiding near here. I would have seen them.
It seemed to come from the edge there, the opening. Come on. Yes. The clearing that overlooks the sea.
Well, there can be nothing to be gained from this. Near the sheer drop down to the rocks below. Nothing at all.
Just a view of the lighthouse on the peak. A mystery. But there was someone here. I heard them.
Do you often hear voices, Watney?
Young Watney was aware that things hadn't gone off to a very good start. Mrs. Peel had been attacked, Frederick Williams had been strangled, and now Dr. Seligman, one of Carnarvon's top scientists, had been shot. Mrs. Peel wasn't very impressed either.
And he didn't say anything before he died?
Yes, he did. And I didn't think it wise to tell Sparshot. He muddled things up, sir. Seligman said, I know how they did it. It's all done by mirrors.
All done by mirrors.
Mrs. Peel looked out of the high windows and down at the crumpled envelope with the calculations scrawled across it. Then she noticed on the other side of the envelope a small outline drawing of a lighthouse. Looking up again, she gazed straight out to the peak upon which was a lighthouse.
All done by mirrors. I think I know what my next port of call will be.
Now,
Didn't Dr. Seligman say anything before he died, Watney?
Yes, he did. I didn't think it wise to tell Sparshot. He muddles things up, sir. Seligman said, I know how they did it. It's all done by mirrors.
Mrs. Peel looked down at the crumpled envelope in her hand. It had been the one that Frederick Williams was scribbling on when he met his death. On the back of the envelope, Mrs. Peel noticed for the first time an outline drawing of a lighthouse. Looking up and gazing out to sea, the first thing she noticed was the point jutting out into the distance, upon which was a lighthouse.
All done by mirrors. I think I know what my next port of call will be.
Episode 4 of this story, in which John Steed realizes why Emma Peel is playing this case solo and follows through on the suggestion that it's all done by mirrors. Young Watney was slightly more than confused. On his first major case, he was investigating security leaks at the Carmaddock Research Establishment. Since he'd arrived with Mrs. Peel, 3 men had died, and Mrs. Peel had been viciously attacked. Watney thought of Mother and was worried. Mrs. Peel's approach to the whole affair didn't help him either. Her method seemed highly unorthodox. She'd left all the inside work to him and appeared intent on chasing vague clues all over the surrounding countryside. And now...
You're going out to that lighthouse, Mrs. Peel?
That's right.
But why? I mean, I don't see.
I'll tell you why when I've been there. Bye for now, Watney. Watney. Oh, and if you get through to Mother, give Steed my love. Goodbye.
Mrs. Peel swept out, leaving Watney even more baffled. A short while after that, Mrs. Peel, at the wheel of her car, headed up the cliff road. She parked skillfully by the rocky path that led to the lighthouse. The lighthouse looked remarkably like the one drawn on the envelope. Mrs. Peel walked boldly up the path and banged on the door. Kettridge, a tough, rugged seaman dressed in traditional clothes, trousers stuffed into sea boots, a blue turtleneck sweater and a grubby cap, stood in the doorway.
Yeah,
I'd like to see the lighthouse keeper.
there isn't one.
Pardon?
This lighthouse doesn't function anymore. It's a private residence.
Kettridge turned away and was about to close the heavy door when Mrs. Peel pushed by him and found herself in the hallway.
Well, in that case, I'd like to speak to the owner.
Now, just look here. You can't force your way in.
What's the trouble, Kettridge?
The speaker was a young, handsome, intelligent-looking man, extremely well-dressed, coming down the stairs.
Can I help you at all?
She wants to see the owner. Busting her way in here.
Well, you must forgive Kettridge. He isn't used to visitors and sometimes becomes a little too diligent. I'm Timothy Barlow, the Colonel's secretary.
Mrs. Emma Peel, how do you do?
How do you do? Well, Mrs. Peel, the Colonel doesn't like to be disturbed with trivialities. So perhaps you would enlarge upon the nature of your business.
Well, it's about the man who fell over the cliffs here recently.
Now, look here.
I would hardly say it's a triviality, Mr. Barlow.
As you say. Hardly. Excuse me one moment.
Barlow moved across the room and picked up a brass speaking tube. He blew down it, listened into it, and then spoke.
Colonel, I have a Mrs. Peel down here. She would like a word with you, if it's at all possible. Yes, I think so. Yes, sir, very good.
Barlow replaced the speaking tube, smiled, and said,
Colonel Withers will see you. This way.
Barlow led the way towards the stairs and began to climb them. Mrs. Peel followed.
A colonel in the lighthouse?
Yes, it's odd, isn't it? A very simple explanation, though. The Colonel comes from a family of soldiers. Yet at heart, he always wanted to be
A sailor?
Yes, that's it. So when he retired, he bought this place.
How long does this go on for? The stairs?
Oh, about a year.
What?
Oh, that's the Colonel's little joke. There are 365 steps, you see, so he says it takes about a year to climb them.
365. I wish you hadn't told me that.
It's not all that bad.
No, it isn't that. It's just that I'm bound to have to count them. Lead on, Mr. Barlow.
While Mrs. Peel was expending a great deal of energy climbing the stairs of the lighthouse, John Steed and Mother were lying back in a couple of floating plastic armchairs in the swimming pool. Mother appeared to be fishing. He tugged on a length of line. Steed opened an eye, began to open his mouth, and then shut both.
Ah, champagne, Steed.
Steed opened both eyes. Mother had pulled some rather costly French champagne from the water.
It would help to pass the time. Thank you, Mother.
Mother expertly opened the champagne, reached for a glass that rested on the floating table, and poured Steed a drink. Steed, wobbling a bit in his seat, took it without a drop being spilt.
Splendid. Far too precious to waste. Cheers, Steed. Cheers. Watney reported in? Not yet. The red telephone could ring at any moment, telling us that the case is over. I rather doubt it. Watney is too raw, inexperienced. As I've said before, we all have to start somewhere. That low. I bet he wouldn't mind swapping places with you right now. Well, I might be wishing the same thing. Anyway, Emma Peel is there. She is well able to look after herself. Extremely capable young woman. You said so yourself. One of the best operators you've got. The best. Well, then, she's a woman. As such, she is vulnerable. Steed, those kind of feelings are strictly contrary to the rules of... Rules, Mother? Yes. You've never acknowledged them, let alone abided by them. I can't help it. It's my way of working. And this charade of close arrest... Now, you promised I could get out of it if I wanted to. Well, I can't stop you, but I can remind you... Remind me? Of what? Remember when you were taught to fly, Steed? Of course. Remember your first solo? If someone had snatched the controls from you then, up there alone, head in the clouds, wouldn't you have felt cheated? You mean Watney? But he's nothing compared to Mrs... solo for Mrs. Peel. Exactly. As I have said, we've all got to start somewhere. Now, what about some more champagne, eh?
In the lighthouse, Barlow and Emma Peel paused for breath at one of the small windows and gazed out.
A long way down?
Only a short way up. Just get through the month of December, and we're there.
30 days past September, April, June, and all the rest have... Right. 31,
Yes.
30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24... 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yes, well, we're here.
Come in.
Mrs. Peel, sir. Mrs. Peel, Colonel Withers.
How do you do, Colonel?
Spartan, Amazonian.
I beg your pardon?
Not the slightest bit out of breath. I like that. Physical fitness, I like it. How do, Mrs. Peel? Well, Marley, you must have thought it important to have brought Mrs. Peel all the way up here.
It's about, poor Mr. Guthrie, sir.
Yeah, relative of yours, eh?
Not exactly a friend. I'm just interested.
Idle curiosity, morbid interest.
Intimate concern.
Nah. That's better. Not enough concern nowadays, not half enough. Well, now, I'm afraid I can't help you.
Well, I haven't asked for help yet.
Hey, got spirit, eh? Like that, yes, like that. Still can't help, never even knew the man.
Or perhaps you saw him.
Hey, saw him? Did I, Barlow?
Well, it's possible, sir, when you were in the villages,
No.
sir. I mean...
No, I meant from over here. This lighthouse overlooks the cliff's head, and I thought, well, perhaps through your telescope. This one, I mean.
Ah, interested in telescopes, are you? One doesn't look at land through a telescope, ma'am. Look through it now. Go on. Go along. Look through it.
Oh, all right. I always like these things.
What do you see, eh?
The sea.
Exactly. That's what you see, the sea. The great, grand, rolling ocean and ships. Often ships, grubby little tankers, liners, ships under sail, under steam, underway to exotic destinations. No, Mrs. Field, you won't find me looking at the land.
Nevertheless, if one swings it around like this,
Mrs. Peel swung the telescope towards the cliffs.
on a clear day, you could practically reach out and touch the cliffs and almost shake hands with your visitors.
Eh? I've already told you that I never look at the... Visitors?
Well, one visitor. She's just getting out of a taxi. She could have a long stay in mind, judging from the luggage.
Hello?
Barlow moved forward, excused himself to Mrs. Peel, seized the telescope and gazed through it.
No idea who she is, sir.
Well, find out. You know how I hate being disturbed.
Colonel Withers shot Mrs. Peel a significant glance. She took the hint, Barlow had already left the tower.
So you didn't know Mr. Guthrie, Colonel?
That is correct.
Then I don't suppose you knew his friend, Mr. Williams, either.
No, probably not. Better ask Barlow.
You rely very much upon Barlow.
He deals with the trivialities, Mrs. Peel. The trivialities.
Thank you, Colonel.
Mrs. Peel left the Colonel and began the descent of the 365 stairs. Halfway down, she paused and looked out of the window. There was a lighted cigarette resting on the window ledge. Mrs. Peel noted that she wasn't alone on the spiral stairway. Then she heard it. The unmistakable sound of a gun being loaded.
Now,
Find out who our latest visitor is, Barlow. You know how I hate to be disturbed.
Colonel Withers shot Mrs. Peel a significant glance. She took the hint and turned to follow Barlow from the lamp room of the lighthouse. At the head of the stairs, she paused.
So you didn't know Mr. Guthrie, Colonel?
That is correct.
Then I don't suppose you knew his friend Frederick Williams, either.
Probably not. You'd better ask Barlow.
You rely very much upon Barlow.
He deals with the trivialities, Mrs. Peel. Trivialities.
Thank you, Colonel.
Mrs. Peel left the Colonel and began the descent of the 365 stairs. Halfway down, she paused and looked out of the window. There was a lighted cigarette resting on the window ledge. Mrs. Peel noted that she wasn't alone on the spiral stairway. Then she heard it. The unmistakable sound of a gun being loaded. Mrs. Peel, without looking round, hurried on. Episode 5 of this story, in which John Steed and Mother are quite unaware of Mrs. Peel's impending fate, and how it is all done by mirrors. Mrs. Peel's investigations into the troubles at the Carnatic Research Centre had led her to the lighthouse on the cliffs. She'd been aware instantly of a strange atmosphere of distrust, and she was quite sure the place was connected with the sudden deaths that had taken place in the neighborhood. Colonel Withers had interviewed her in the lamp room at the top of the tower. He'd not been at all helpful, and Mrs. Peel had been more or less dismissed. Knowing she was being watched, with more calmness than she felt, Mrs. Peel descended to the base of the stairs to find that there was a new visitor, the girl she'd seen through the telescope.
I do hope I have arrived at the right time.
Well, you see that...
I've only
that
got
is...
the one suitcase, but it is rather heavy. 364, 365. Phew, darn. I must say the year passes more quickly on the way down.
I really am sorry, Miss Marshall, but I don't think the Colonel
Oh, but
will
of
see you.
course the Colonel will see me, and of course I'm going to stay. I'd hardly arrive with all this stuff otherwise. Oh, I'm sorry. Perhaps you can help me. Can you make sense of it all? I'm Pandora Marshall. I arranged weeks ago to interview Colonel Withers. He agreed and asked me to stay here as his guest. He agreed to let me investigate all his developments.
Mrs. Peel has nothing to do with all this.
That's quite true, Miss Marshall. I'm a stranger here myself.
Oh, then I expect...
The Colonel is a very busy man.
He didn't seem very busy when I left him.
Barlow glared at her. Emma Peel ignored the look and went on.
And he does seem inclined to forget things. He told me to ask you if you knew Mr. Williams.
Oh, look, I'm sorry, but I'm getting nowhere fast. If I could just speak to Mr. Barlow.
Oh, but you are. This is Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Barlow? But surely I mean, you are the Mr. Barlow who wrote me this...
Pandora Marshall produced a letter from her rather large handbag.
You agreed to all the arrangements, to me staying here, meeting the Colonel. That is your signature, isn't it, Mr. Barlow?
Yes, of course it is. Oh, you really must forgive me. I'm afraid I owe an apology.
I must be getting as forgetful as the Colonel. Kettridge.
Yes, Mr. Barlow.
Show Miss Marshall to one of our guest cabins. I'm awfully sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Mistakes can happen. When do I get to see the Colonel?
Just as soon as he's free. We'll get you settled in first.
Oh, very well. Goodbye, Miss Marshall. Goodbye. Oh, by the way, what line of business are you in? Well, it's not unlike yours. I investigate developments. Maybe we'll meet again. Goodbye for now.
Outside, in the sea air, Emma Peel paused by the side of her car and looked up at the tall granite building. Then she made a decision. She climbed into her car and drove along the cliff road towards the research station. Inside the lighthouse...
Is Miss Marshall safe in her guest room?
Yes, she's all right. What happens now?
I've spoken to the Colonel over the blur. He's coming down. We must hold an emergency meeting in his office here on the ground floor. There's got to be some quick thinking done, Kettridge. Some very quick thinking indeed.
But Miss Pandora Marshall wasn't as easy to fool as all that. She watched from the chink in the door of her room as the three men moved into an inner office. Then she slipped out and up the stairs with energy which would have made even Emma Peel raise an eyebrow in appreciation. She passed the spot where Emma had seen the lighted cigarette. It was no longer there. Eventually, she found the lamp room and gently opened the door.
No one in here.
Pandora examined the room swiftly, then saw the telescope. She moved towards it, peered through it.
Powerful. Oh, there goes a car. Mrs. Peel's, I think. I wonder. Now, if what the Colonel says is true...
Pandora examined the tripod of the telescope more closely. There was a black box attached to one section. She opened it. Inside the box was a dial marked Activate, a speaking tube, a small receiving speaker, and a coil of flex with a distinctive-looking plug at one end.
Yes? Yes, it figures out all right. Now, where would this plug in?
It was the work of a moment to find a socket leading to the lamp itself, which, because of its distinctive shape, was obviously the right one. Pandora plugged in and switched on the Activate switch.
Now, find something, or somebody on the cliffs, and I should be able to hear every word they say.
She peered down the telescope, focusing it on the cliff. She picked up two figures. They were Major Sparshot and Watney. They were standing next to an open car.
It's all totally baffling, Major Sparshot.
I'm not as convinced as you are, Watney.
The area was absolutely deserted, and yet I heard voices.
Well, Mr. Watney, we went through these woods with a fine-tooth comb.
Pandora adjusted the lens right onto the windscreen of Watney's car.
Now we'll see.
Then we must have missed something very vital.
The glare from the lamp shone through the telescope and hit the driving mirror of the car. Pandora spoke into the speaking tube.
Boo.
Down on the cliffs, Watney wheeled round.
What the devil was that?
What the devil was what?
I thought I heard someone call out just behind me.
Oh, you're not hearing things again, are you? Come on, you need a drink.
There, surely you heard it.
Gulls crying overhead. Come on, I'm thirsty.
Sparshot persuaded the mystified Watney to get into the car, and they drove away. Pandora smiled to herself as she swung the telescope back along the cliff road. She picked up yet another car. It was Mrs. Peel's. Mrs. Peel was checking the area, and like Watney and Sparshot, had found nothing. Pandora focused the telescope onto the windscreen of Emma's car and grabbed the speaking tube.
Mrs. Peel, don't be alarmed. I'm talking to you by means of a visual audio telescope from the lighthouse. There's something very funny going on. I knew it when I first arrived. You see, I've met the real Mr. Barlow before, and this one is not the same man at all. Mrs. Peel? Mrs. Peel, can't you hear me?
Peering down the telescope, Pandora could tell that her message had not got through to Mrs. Peel at all. She hastily made several adjustments to the focusing. Down on the cliff's edge, Emma Peel was about to get into the car when she heard...
Mrs. Peel? Mrs. Peel? What the devil? Who is it speaking? It's me, Pandora Marshall. What? Oh, where are you? Well, I'm here at the...
The message was cut off quite suddenly. The reason was that Barlow and Kettridge had returned to the lamp room. Kettridge placed a large hand over Pandora's mouth. He jammed a loaded gun into her ribs.
Oh, don't move or it'll be your last.
The activate switch. There, that's got it. Who are you trying to get at? I see. Mrs. Peel out there on the cliffs. Well, it might be a good idea at that. Mm-hmm. And she's calling someone on her car telephone. Switch on again. We may learn everything we want to know.
On the cliffs, Emma was indeed using the car telephone. She was calling Watney at the research centre.
Hello? Hello, Watney, can you hear me?
Yes, Mrs. Peel. Watney here. Where are you?
I'm out on the cliff head, on my way back from the lighthouse. There's something very, very funny going on.
Oh, what do you mean, funny?
Well, I thought I heard a voice out of thin air.
You heard it? Oh, that's great. Means I'm not mad. Now, hold on, Mrs. Peel. I'm coming out straight away.
I'll be waiting.
So you did get through to her, Miss Marshall?
I didn't tell her anything.
Kettridge, get downstairs, get your motorcycle, and get after the woman down there. I'll hold her. Try and lure her to the edge.
Right, leave it to me.
Now, listen.
No, you listen to me. Do everything I tell you. Repeat every word, or else. Understand, Miss Marshall?
A short while after that, Mrs. Peel, waiting by her car for Watney, was again aware of a curious glare on the windscreen. It was then that she heard the cry again.
Help! Who are you? Where are you speaking from?
Please help me. Over here. The cliff edge.
But I can't see anyone.
Here, I'm over here. Please help me. Help!
I'm coming. Just keep calling.
Mrs. Peel, clearly thinking that Pandora must have fallen over the edge of the cliff and was clinging on somewhere below, made her way forward.
Please. I'm down here. This way.
Suddenly, Kettridge appeared as though from nowhere. He roared his bike down the path, skidded it neatly at Emma Peel's feet. She fell backwards with a startled scream. She lost her balance, clutched wildly, but couldn't get a grip, and toppled over the edge of the cliff.
Now,
I'm over here. Please help me. Help!
Keep calling, I'm coming.
Mrs. Peel, thinking that Pandora Marshall had slipped over the cliff edge, started forward.
Please, I'm down here. This way.
Suddenly, Kettridge appeared from nowhere, roaring his motorbike down the cliff path. He skidded it neatly at Mrs. Peel's feet, knocking her backward. She gave a startled scream. She lost her balance, scrabbled wildly at the earth at the top of the cliff, couldn't get a grip, and toppled over the edge. Episode 6 in this story, in which John Steed hears from Mother of Mrs. Peel's fate. And young Watney just can't grasp the significance of the fact that it's all done by Miller. The arrival of Pandora Marshall at the lighthouse had certainly brought matters to a head. She'd been invited down there to work with the real Colonel Withers on his experimental telescope. The telescope was an invention that could transmit and receive sounds along a light beam from the lamp of the lighthouse. Pandora had been caught trying to use the telescope to inform Mrs. Peel, who was waiting for Watney on the cliffs. Later, Barlow and Kettridge had forced Pandora to join them in enticing Mrs. Peel into a dangerous position on the edge of the cliffs. It was there that Kettridge, on his motorbike, had successfully forced her over. Barlow, looking down the telescope, saw the whole thing. Kettridge, from the cliff top, waved a signal of victory.
So, that's that.
One less inquiring woman.
You forced me to do that. Forced me to lure Mrs. Peel to her death.
It's either her death or your own. You were the lucky
But
one.
this is murder. What did you do with the others? The real Barlow, the Colonel. Did you kill them?
They are under detention in the cellar, and that's exactly where you are going the moment Kettridge gets back
But
here.
you can't get away with this.
That's enough. Come on. Get down those stairs. Don't try any funny stuff. This gun is loaded, and you know now that a little thing like killing isn't going to stand in my way. Get going.
Out on the top of the cliff, Watney had appeared with Major Sparshot in search of Emma Peel.
It's very strange. She said she'd be waiting.
There's the car.
Mrs. Peel? Emma? Emma, where are you?
Not in the car.
She said she'd be out here, and that she'd heard strange voices calling to her.
Oh, no, not that again.
But it's true, Major Sparshot. I heard them first when Dr. Seligman was killed, and she said she'd be waiting here. There's no other way down. Emma! Mrs. Peel! Emma! No use.
There is one other way down, you know.
Sparshot indicated with a thumb towards the edge of the cliff.
Oh, no. Well, that's impossible.
You better take a look.
What's this in the gravel? It looks like a wheel mark.
Something skidded and went right off the edge of the cliff. Wait a minute. Look at this. The shoe. Caught in the turf, right on the edge here.
That's Mrs. Peel's. And look, tufts of grass pulled out, all the gravel torn away
as though someone went over. Did she fall or was she pushed? Now, there's another shoe floating down near those rocks down there. Can you see?
Where? Oh, yes. Yes, it is. What am I going to tell Mother?
Mother was still in the swimming pool when the call came through. As he listened, his already sunburned face became almost as red as the receiver he held to his ear.
What? When? You're quite sure? Have other people verified this? I don't care to just go on your observations.
John Steed, floating nearby, pricked up his ears.
What are the chances? As I see. But you'll keep searching. Right. Oh, yes, I'll give you your instructions, all right. But first things first, a detailed report. Call me as soon as you hear anything. Right.
Well, Mother, what is it?
It's early days.
And just what is that supposed to mean?
I never placed much store by the first report.
Nevertheless, I would like you to confide in me the substance of the first report.
Well, no give. No point in getting alarmed until we know for sure.
Mother.
Have a drink, Steed.
Mother!
I think at the Times I've had it reported and confirmed that you were,
That I was what?
Missing. A drink?
Mrs. Peel?
Temporarily, mislaid, I'm sure.
How did it happen?
I haven't got all the facts yet.
Well, just a smattering of facts for circumstances.
Fell over a cliff.
What?
Totally unconfirmed, though.
Was it a high cliff?
Well, moderately.
Yes, I've seen your moderate measures of Scotch. Well, what are the chances?
I told you, we don't know for sure.
What are the chances?
Well, if she survived the fall, if she missed the rocks, if she wasn't swept out to sea, I'd say the chances were reasonable. Provided she could make a 5-mile swim, then she could make home. Rather the worse for wear.
The water was deep beneath the cliff, but the currents were swift, and the body in the water at that point would be swept out to sea and round in an arc. Mrs. Peel, knocked half unconscious by the impact with the water, had sense enough to lie still and not fight. She drifted until she noticed that the peak, where the lighthouse stood, was gradually getting nearer. She'd lost her shoes. It made it easier. She struck out in the direction of the shore. Later, much later, and exhausted, she pulled her way up the slippery rocks and lay panting, regaining her strength. The man Kettridge was playing patience when the knock came at the lighthouse door. He scraped back his chair, walked over, and opened it. There was no one there. Kettridge leaned out.
Anyone out here? Hey? Hey!
Mrs. Peel drop-kicked the man squarely in the face as he bent forward. He hurtled inside, hit the far wall, and collapsed. Mrs. Peel picked herself up, closed the door, glanced at the patient's game, put a black 2 on a red 3, stepped over Kettridge, and went investigating.
Not a year's journey on those stairs at this stage of the game.
She noticed a set of steps leading down from the ground floor, but there was no door, or none that she could see, yet there was some form of movement from beyond the wall.
It's just got to be hollow. Another room beyond. Well, here goes.
Mrs. Peel grabbed an empty coffee mug from a table and began sounding the stonework.
Ah, that's got it. The metal door begins about here.
But before Mrs. Peel could pursue this line of thought, a whole side of the wall swung inwards. Markin, the bodyguard, came out, or attempted to. Mrs. Peel butted him in the stomach, seized him by the neck, and threw him into the room. She closed the door and looked about her. It looked more like a cellar than an ordinary room. A rattle of chains nearby drew her attention. 3 figures were manacled to the stone.
Right, hold on. I'll soon have that gag off. Oh, thank heavens. Oh, but Mrs. Peel, the cliff. You went over the cliff. I saw you fall.
I was pushed. That was their mistake. I was pushed clear of the rocks. After that, well, I can swim. Let's get these other 2 so they can speak. Here.
Oh, thank you.
You must be the real Barlow.
Yes,
And
yes.
he's the real Colonel.
Well, hold on, Colonel. Soon have this out of your mouth.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm Colonel Withers.
The others are all imposters, foreign agents. They're stealing secrets from the research establishment.
Yes, I guessed that much.
But how?
With my retrometer.
I came here to help him with it. That's why I was invited to carry out the interview that brought me down here. It's a tremendous achievement.
It transmits sound along a light beam. All you need is a shiny surface.
And you can receive and transmit.
Or eavesdrop. But you can explain the scientific details later. Let's get you out of here.
I doubt it'll be of any use. You need the key. You'll never break the chains.
I know a man who can open these at the drop of a bowler hat. Oh, I'm afraid you're right. Without the right tools...
Never mind about us. Get the retrometer to fetch help.
Right. Where is it?
It's attached to the telescope in the lamp room. The black box on one side. Plug it into the socket on the lamp. Switch on activate.
Focus on any shiny surface that will reflect near the person to whom you want to speak. They will hear your voice, get them to speak, and you will hear theirs. It's a telephone using light waves.
I see. Right, I'll be as quick as I can.
Mrs. Peel was in luck. Kettridge was still unconscious where she'd left him. There was no sign of the false Barlow. Mrs. Peel made for the circular stairs that led to the tower. It took some time.
362, 363, 364. Phew, 365.
The door to the lamp room was open. Mrs. Peel entered so gently that the false Colonel Withers, sitting near the telescope, thought she was one of his men.
Carl, it looks as though our job's finished. We've got all the information we need. We should get out.
Out is the operative word.
What?
Mrs. Peel seized one end of the telescope and, timing it perfectly, swung it round in an arc. The far end caught the bogus colonel under the chin. As you said, Mrs. Peel, out is the operative word.
Now,
Mrs. Peel made the climb up the circular stairs of the lighthouse in record time.
362, 363, 364, 365.
The door to the lamp room was open. Mrs. Peel entered so gently that the bogus Colonel Withers, who was sitting near the telescope, thought she was one of his men.
Girl, it looks as though our job is finished. We've got all the information we need. We should get out.
Out is the operative word.
What?
Mrs. Peel seized one end of the telescope and, timing it perfectly, swung it round in an arc. The far end caught the bogus colonel under the chin. He went out without a word. Episode 7, the final episode of this story, in which Mother allows John Steed to take a more active part, Emma Peel solves all her difficulties, and even Watney is convinced that it's all done by mirrors. The fight was on at the lighthouse. Mrs. Peel had failed to release the real Colonel Withers and Timothy Barlow, who, with Pandora Marshall, were chained to a wall in the lighthouse cellar. But she had successfully laid out the jailer, Markin, and Kettridge was sprawled out flat in the hall. Mrs. Peel then gained access to the lamp room in the tower and flattened the bogus colonel. But she knew help had to arrive quite soon. The only help she could always rely on was lounging in a bathrobe by Mother's pool. The red telephone rang. Mother reached out for it.
Mother?
Mother, it's Watney.
One is more than enough. What progress?
None, I'm afraid. Nothing to report. Mrs. Peel is still missing.
I think you'd better come home, Watney, don't you?
Yes, Mother. No, Mother. That is, if there's nothing more I can do down here, Mother.
I consider that you've done more than enough, Watney, unfortunately.
Yes, Mother. Sorry, Mother.
We're all sorry, Watney. You will be replaced. Goodbye.
Recalled Watney?
One of life's little failures. Where are you going, Steed?
To change into some clothes, find my umbrella and hat, and take a helicopter.
Helicopter? You're not playing games, are you?
No, I'm playing a hunch. The only clue in the reports we received from Watney was that Dr. Seligman's dying words were, "It's all done by mirrors."
Well, yes, I didn't note that myself. Thrown any light on it?
On due reflection, exactly that. According to my map of the Carmatic Research Establishment, it's bang slap opposite a lighthouse. I think I'll drop in on them. Bye, Mother.
Outside the Carmatic Research Establishment, Watney was about to climb into Mrs. Peel's car. He was a very crestfallen young man. Sparshot came over to him.
Recalled, eh? Recalled and replaced. Another mess for Steed to clean up. Oh, well.
Watney held out his hand. Sparshot was too much of a gentleman not to take it.
Well, goodbye. No more hearing voices, eh? I hope not.
Watney got into his car and was about to start it up when a bright light flashed into the driving mirror.
Watney! Watney! Watney!
Oh, no.
In the lamp room, Mrs. Peel, the retrometer working perfectly, was trying to reach Watney for help.
Watney! Oh, you silly little shopping bag. Drive like that, and how can I keep a focus on your windscreen? Watney! Watney!
But down on the cliff road, Watney only heard his name echoing in the wind. He disappeared behind a clump of trees. Contact was lost at exactly the same moment that Barlow's men started to break the door down. Emma Peel stared through the telescope. This looked like her last chance. She saw her car with Watney at the wheel appear from behind the trees. She focused clearly upon him and yelled.
Watney! Watney, help me! It's Emma Peel! I'm in the lighthouse! Help!
There was no more time. Two thugs entered the room. Mrs. Peel swung the telescope wildly, hit one of the men. The other drew a gun. Mrs. Peel engaged him. The light from the telescope spun over the landscape. Dear Miss Daisy, preparing the inevitable tray of tea in her sitting room, suddenly became aware of the light and the fight.
Let's hope Mr. Guthrie will come home for tea today.
Oh, no, you don't!
What is it? Who's in here with me?
I'll kill you. I've orders to kill.
Not this way!
Oh! Thieves! Fire! Murder!
Oh, assault! Exposure! Arson! Swindle! Fraud!
The old lady dropped her tea tray and ran off into her garden in hysterics. Up at the Carmadoc Research Centre, Major Sparshot was poring over some papers in his study when the light flashed onto a mirror.
Now we've got rid of that young fool from the ministry who was always muddling things by hearing voices, and I may get some results.
Oh, no, you won't get results that way, my friend.
I think I shall have to go home.
Mrs. Peel, from her end of the proceedings, was having a very tough time, but help was near at hand, or actually just overhead. Steed, in the helicopter, gave instructions.
Put her down there, on that small grass patch above the rocks, to the right of the main entrance. Think you can manage it?
We'll be able to, sir. Here goes. Doesn't look much going on down there.
If he only knew. But the pilot managed the landing with great skill, and Steed found himself bounding up the steps to the lighthouse 2 at a time. In the hallway, he halted. Mrs. Peel's life-and-death struggle was drowned by the cries for help rising from the cellar. Steed moved swiftly but cautiously. He pushed open the half-concealed door.
Oh, thank heaven, someone's heard us. Please, can you get us out of here?
These chains, old man.
We've been chained up here for days.
Extraordinary procedure for a lighthouse. Caught smuggling.
Oh, please, every moment is precious. Mrs. Peel may be in trouble.
Ah, then I was right. Steel chains into the wall. Well, I have the very thing.
Great Scott, it works.
And now you, sir.
Right, I'm free.
Next.
Yes. I'm all right, thank heavens.
Right, now, before we all get deliriously happy, will you please tell me what this is all about?
I think I better
No, thank you. Just one at a time. Quietly and carefully. And, as it's always custom to have ladies first, what about you, miss? My name is Steed, John Steed.
Oh, of course, Mr. Steed. Well, my name is Pandora Marshall, and this is Colonel Withers. Mm-hmm. Now, the Colonel invented a new type of telescope, the sort that could be used as sound as well as optical.
But in the lamp room in the tower, Mrs. Peel couldn't afford to take things so leisurely. She knew the strength of the man opposite her was formidable. It only needed the bogus colonel and the other thug to come round, and she'd never stand a chance. So she used all her wits to put an end to the struggle.
A breathing space. Now.
She went for the door, but before she could reach the stairs...
An impressive performance, but not quite impressive enough, Mrs. Peel.
Barlow stood in the doorway. He held a deadly-looking gun.
You must pardon me if I reserve the right not to indulge in this form of violence.
I see. A really professional crook. The type that never soils his hands. Just gets those of his underlings covered with blood.
Perhaps. I try my best. You at least escaped the first time. You've done a lot of damage to our organization, Mrs. Peel. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. And so...
Barlow raised his gun, but at that point, Watney rushed into the lamp room, throwing open the door wide. The door slammed Barlow in the back, knocking the gun from his hand.
Oh, I'm most terribly sorry.
Watch it!
I say, watch out. Oh!
Watney failed to hold Barlow as Mrs. Peel threw him forward. Watney staggered through the open doorway, swung round. The unconscious body of Barlow slumped forward. Watney grabbed at him, and in doing so, he pushed him towards the circular staircase.
Oh, well thrown, Watney.
I say, what have I done?
Just effectively thrown the top man down the stairs. Steed will be most impressed when he gets to know about this. There are 365 stairs, Watney. He's got to 10 now. 11, 12, 13, 14... 363, 364, 365... Oh, must be leap year. Come on, Watney. Let's see what the damage is.
Mrs. Peel! Are you all right up there?
Steed!
Steed? How the devil did he get here?
Probably dropped out of the blue.
But how did he know where to come to?
Experience, Watney. Watney. Just experience.
Mrs. Peel, you all right?
Well, of course. I've got Watney to protect me. Relax now, Watney. You're in the big league, which means one thing.
Eh?
Let me do the talking. Coming down, Steed!
Later, in a helicopter...
Watney driving your car home?
That's right.
Wouldn't you sooner have gone with him? Well, sooner than being here, I mean.
want an honest answer.
Well, not if it'll offend my vanity.
It won't. This is much nearer heaven.
Well, I think we should go under close arrest together next time. Don't you, Mrs. Peel?
Avengers.
Listen every evening, Monday to Friday, to John Steed and Emma Peel, The Avengers.